today I am with Hex, Kite, and Story Mark. Hey guys, how's it going?
What's up?
Hello. Greetings, people of Earth. How are we doing?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about. I think we talked about something along the lines of this, but I think we're going to hit it more directly, which I think is really important topic. It's about how to like write in sympathy and empathy, like how to portray that in characters. Um, I believe I should have checked. I believe this was Water's topic, but since it's not here, I can guess give a quick general rundown of what like sympathy and empathy is. If yeah, so I think sympathy and empathy is just means of just telling like how you can relate to a character in this regard, a character in a story. Um, sympathize with a character is where I think you can understand where they're coming from like we can almost say like a logical sense, but you can understand where they're coming from. Like okay, like you've been through this and this, like these things, and that's kind of rough. Like that's hard. And empathizing is where you almost feel like you've kind of been walked through that experience with them. So it's almost like you're taking on their feelings in a way. So like that's the general sense of like sympathy and empathy. I guess like the in terms of like how to like, and then now so now you understand that it's just more about how do you portray that in stories. Is there a good way? Is there a bad way? Can you take it too far? That's like the main question on the chopping block today. I could start with a question like, what's the what's it? So like, have you guys got like examples of?
Examples aren't necessary immediately.
Mm,
There's way more important to touch on first, honestly. Like that can lead to examples, but
okay.
here it's a little bit of time for me to do my usual thing where I go into insane amounts of detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure who has seen a certain topic I've talked about on my channel because when anyone who knows me, when it comes to talking about writing, I will emphasize over and over again that character is probably the most important thing to get down early on.
Mm,
And if you want to get people to invest in your characters, there's three things I always talk about. BCI, believe, care, invest. With empathy and sympathy and all that, that connects to the care part. C, caring.
mm,
So this is the easiest way to get us to connect with characters is to, well, pretty much one of this. It's possible to care without believing or investing. Or
mm,
caring isn't, yeah, it is impossible.
mm,
Still, caring is essential and all that stuff. It gets us to the heart of the hero and all kinds of stuff like that. As for how, there's really like four. There's four rules of caring. The first rule is one, harm them in a way that reveals their flaws. Second, you want the opening harm should be deserved but outsized. Like it should be a little bit somewhat deserved, but like this goes way overboard in how they go about it and stuff like that. Like, well, we'll come back to examples and stuff later, or I'll let you guys like if you can think of some. And the third rule, hurt the hero in a way that only hurts your hero. You want to customize it to this specific person and everything like that.
yeah.
And for the fourth one, some things are painfully ironic based on what we know. And so like you want to use irony to like hurt and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think.
as a whole, when it comes to hurting people, like really it comes down to either give suffering, lack, embarrassment, humiliation, or worry. I have many subcategories on how you can, but I'm not going to go into that just yet or anything like that since, well, let you all like process all that and so on.
Mm. No, yeah, I get it. I think when you're talking about like finding a way to hurt your character in a unique way, it's kind of, I guess another way you can look at it is you finding the character's weakness. It's like, okay, imagine you have the character, you sitting on the table, and it's like, hey character, what are your strengths? X, Y, Z. Okay, your strengths are this. Okay, what are your weaknesses? Okay, there are, I don't know, I hate bugs. It's like, okay, so what's your worst nightmare? It's like, oh yeah, I don't know, just my family turned birthed a bunch of bugs. It's like, okay, cool. And then I don't know, in the story, you have something like that happen, or you give them basically just a thing that really challenges their weakness. I think in a way, is
Yeah,
one way to look at it, yeah.
it's one reason why, like, well, actually, I've kind of touched on a bit of how I prefer to do this. Like, since we have tons of tools that we can use to find this stuff, like, for instance, there's the Enneagram of Personality, which there's all kinds of ways you can customize, like, people's fears and stuff like that. There's MBTI, Myers-Briggs Temperament Indicator. I personally prefer using the Enneagram of these two. And there's also, well, desire profiles, but I'm like the only person who knows about that in the writing field, so I'm not going to go into as much detail with that. But focusing on the Enneagram, like, yeah, you can customize your hurt to the specific person. Since, like, for instance, I'm an Enneagram 3, right? The achiever, adaptable, excelling, driven, image conscious, etc. And one of our, like, basic fears is of being worthless. And so if you want to, like, make me suffer, like, you know, you would, like, give me something that deals with lack or embarrassment or humiliation or work, like something that's customized to my specific fear. And that's what you would do, like, with any character, like, understand who they are, their Enneagram in this case, and then, like, customize the pain specifically to them.
Yeah. And also, it kind of goes into, well, I kind of touched on it again, but it's just like I think what makes it work is, and makes you empathize with them, is you see a character struggling. I think when you watch a character and they don't go any, they're not under any struggle, there's no real, like, conflict, it's like, okay, cool, but I don't know, why am I here watching this? You know, it doesn't draw you in, you know, because you're not seeing someone going through, like, an experience that you could probably learn from. Because I think at the end of the day, when we go through shows, we're watching it to see the characters, but we're watching it to learn or to know more about ourselves. I think that's what really kind of gets down to the root of it. So then,
yeah, more often than not, like, there are stories where you can, like, have other appeals, such as the healing. Wait, no, not that one. That one's still, like, more like stuff that where it is meant to be more relaxed or comedy stuff like that. But yeah, as a whole, the more longer form stuff, the more you do want someone to suffer in some way. And if it's not the protagonist, then the character who they're helping out is the one who's suffering, and the protagonist is more of a catalyst hero or something like that who helps them get through the suffering.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I had some more questions. But if any of you have anything you wanna like anything you wanna throw into it, you can go.
Let's see, like, example wise or like technique.
Okay, I guess I can give an example. I guess an example would be, I don't know, we're kind of talking, like, technically when you're just saying, like, the weakness of a character, and then you kind of, like, you're basically prodding that weakness. So then it's just kind of like, it's a matter of it's just a matter of understanding what the weakness is, and then prodding it, and then by doing that, the audience, they're like, oh, okay, this guy, this character, they go through this harsh thing. It helps them relate more. And also, I think what's more important is what the character does afterwards. You can have a character, you can prod their weakness, and if they just, all they're doing is, like, complaining and sitting in the background, you're just not, it doesn't really help. Maybe this could be,
No,
it doesn't really work, you know. So
the sad sack is not a good, like, really. There's, when it comes to sympathy, like, there's two characters who are absolutely unlovable. One is the perfect character, which, you know, that one's pretty much, everyone knows the issues with this. But the other one is when people go to the opposite extreme, which is the sad sack, which is where you, like, create this, like, absolutely horrible thing. But, like, the quote from a little book I have on this, like, that brings it up. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Sometimes, instead of going for the perfect character, we try to use the character the reader can't help but sympathize with because of their horrible situation or his awful life. We keep the villains coming at him and keep tearing him down until he's brought no lower, and then we pull out the rug. Who wouldn't sympathize with someone so put upon? It may seem like readers will have to love him. While it's always fun for us to put the screws to our characters, the danger here is piling on the pain so deep that our characters are left as victims, immobilized by all their problems, especially early in the book. A passive victim doesn't struggle, just suffers, as editor and Rita Award-winning author Alicia Rasley puts in her article Sympathy Without Saintliness. Defeat isn't sympathetic, it's pathetic. A character can even begin to actively turn off readers if he notes his own horrible, unending fate while still doing nothing to fight it. First few times we see the cartoon character of Eeyore, we pity him, but eventually we recognize the pattern. When something bad befalls him, it's just another thing piled on. And that's exactly how he sees these negative events. He can't escape his horrible fate and accepts it with passive-aggressive complaints. When our character's complaining turns to playing the victim or whining, we're driving away readers. It may be good for an occasional comical relief, but many readers wouldn't want to spend 300 pages seeing the world through Eeyore's eyes. So yeah, that's the opposite side where you get too extreme with that.
Yeah, because funnily enough, I did see a comment like this a couple of years ago regarding some characters in Final Fantasy, of course. Like, for example, it's very easy for people to see Squall in Final Fantasy VIII and just be immediately put off by him, because he always feels as though he's throwing his weight around and he's perpetually miserable.
That's why I don't like him.
Yeah, like, the thing with Squall is that he does have something to him and why that behavior is there. But the problem is, you spend a majority of that game with him being completely unpleasant and pushing people away to the point where he is suffering and getting hurt. You don't really care, because here's the thing. You've never seen this character happy. So when he is in his perpetual state of anger and depression, or just being completely aloof, it is very difficult for the audience to empathize. Then you get the opposite extreme with Zidane of Final Fantasy IX.
Oh, I love Zidane.
Zidane, from the moment you open up the game, has got to be the most uplifting character. Yeah, he's a little bit of a perv. He's a little bit skeezy. The thing about him is that, even in spite of that, there's no one who believes in the potential of his friends better than him. He believes in you. So when you get to a portion of the game where he is forced to come to recognize what his existence ultimately means, he is completely shattered by this revelation. And you as the audience, you are invested, because you've been playing the game up till now, seeing Zidane at the height of his joy. And now you see all that come crashing down when he comes to the revelation that he's meant to destroy people. He's meant to kill people. And this ultimately makes him question his self-worth, to push the people he loves away, because if this is the purpose that he was born for, he may as well go all in. But he doesn't believe that for a minute. He simply fooled himself into buying this. So when his friends eventually come to him and pull him out of that slump, it hits all the more. Because again, you know what this guy is about. You know what he looks like when he's happy. And when you finally see him break down bit by bit, little by little, that is a very good case of, I feel, what we're talking about here. It's very difficult to empathize or even sympathize with a character who we've only seen them in one state of mind. It's kind of like, hey, did you know that Angela is depressed again? What else is new? I mean,
is Angela depressed? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. You're not even asking, okay, well, what she's depressed about. It's more like, no, you already know that they're depressed and they're not doing anything to fix the situation. As cruel as it sounds, there comes a point in time where people get to a point where, when someone is in this perpetual state of not improving or not doing anything to fix their situation, it comes across as either white noise or just gets very easy for you not to care. This is why the Eeyore example just now is probably one of the best ones that we can point to. Because anytime you watch anything with Pooh, all you know is that Eeyore is just going to be in the background complaining or whining about something. This is true even in any video game he shows up in. Notably in the Kingdom Hearts series. Like, you will find Eeyore minding his own business, whining about, I can't do nothing without Mateo.
Don't worry about me, Sora. Don't worry about me, Sora. This is just how life is for me.
Exactly.
I don't need any help at all. Wouldn't matter anyway. Things would probably go wrong.
Exactly. And the thing is, when you're dealing with a character like that for so long, even though the writer wants you to care about this person, but the thing is that they're not learning anything. They're not trying to improve. They're not making any active steps. When you have a character that is so knee-deep into this broody behavior, which, since I'm on the topic of Final Fantasy, I'm going to bring up Cloud and Advent Children. I understand why, but I absolutely hate his portrayal in that movie. The thing is, if you played the original game, if you've even played Crisis Core and everything, you understand why Cloud is the way he is here. Because he feels as though nothing is working out. He's back to square one all over again. But the problem is, it's one thing to have a character be at their lowest, but it is another thing to make it feel as though it is actively wasting the audience's time and investment. Because you want to see this character get better, but it feels like you are trudging through a lesson that they have already learned. So it kind of feels like we've been hit with the reset button. We're supposed to care about this character all over again from the beginning, but what has happened instead is that the character's arc has been completely reset. So instead of us trying to bridge a gap of sympathy for this character, we can't do it. We fundamentally cannot do it because we've already seen this journey, and we see this journey many other times with many different characters. But what really is at hand here is whether or not the audience actually buys or is actually invested in them improving. But if the character themselves is not invested in that improvement, what's the point?
Yeah, this actually brings. I don't know if anyone here has read Manga in Theory and Practice, Araki, like the creator of JoJo's book. He actually brings up a little bit something about this, since he has his philosophy with don't fall for the temptation to go negative and stuff like that. Which he notes that yes, in real life people rise and fall and stuff like that. In stories, it's not as satisfying, and he recommends against the falling pattern. Like, to always stick to a positive trajectory, just because. Like, he uses an example of Kick-Ass 2, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. What was it? Yeah, as he notes. Let's see. I'm going to switch to an example from film, specifically Kick-Ass 2, a sequel to the 2010 video about a geeky boy who tries to become a real-life superhero. One character, whom I particularly liked, was a superhero called Hit Girl. But in the sequel to the popular film, Hit Girl gives up crime fighting and returns to a normal life. A story like this will only irritate viewers who will think, go back to being Hit Girl. We don't want to see you not be Hit Girl. Everyone knows you're going to go back to being her in the end anyway. As expected, she does return to the vigilante persona at the end, but all that does is bring her back to square one, and that's hardly exciting to watch. I think the creators of that movie probably wanted to show her going through normal adolescent troubles, but it should have found a way to include those elements with her still moving forward as a character. No matter how hard it may be to come up with an idea, that work is necessary. If you Morgana, move. Sorry, my cat.
You named your cat Morgana?
Yeah, I caught that earlier. Yeah.
Anyway, if you end simply at the beginning, the viewer will just think, so what? Perhaps a dip in the character's arc might be all right if you had grown even further before the end, but the movie reaffirms my belief that a sequel has to keep moving in a positive direction if there's a chance for it to surpass the original.
Yeah, because that's interesting you said that, because when I was listening to that, I was about to ask, would it have worked better if she regressed, but when she came back, she learned something new because of the experience? Because then that makes her journey. Going back. I personally think it's fine, but like here I'll even quote from her as he goes on: "The trap of going back to zero. Another common story is the arrival of an blah blah blah, however, a pasta hero. But Morgana, please move." Yeah. Pet her while she's on the ground. Anyway, another common example is the arrival of an imposter hero, but those always end with no overall change, and are almost another example of the failing pattern of returning to zero. Whenever an imposter shows up, the real hero is going to win. This just isn't entertaining from an audience perspective. It comes from the distasteful taste of a sequel, but from desire, blah, blah, blah. But as he says that, or another part, for someone who is lucky enough to have a superhero to decide to quit, in my opinion, it's a fatal negative turn. When a reader sees a character like that, they're only going to be thinking, what, you're not going to do anything? We all know you're going to return to it in the end, so just hurry up and do it already. Like, that's why he notes that when it came to making JoJo and stuff like that, he always, like, why he kept switching up the protagonist and everything like that with each part, because he's like, no, this character stuff is done. He didn't want to, like, fall into those type of patterns and so on. I personally don't see that as a problem myself, and, like, as he even notes, reality doesn't always move in a positive direction and stuff like that. In real life, we have setbacks. Sometimes great effort still meets failure, blah, 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 etc. But, don't seek reality in entertainment. There's a difference, and it factors into satisfaction and so on. That's true. Yeah.
Because the thing is, the irony with the Advent Children Cloud example that I made is it falls under the typical structure of how entertainment would work. But the thing is, the character's low point is already at the beginning, and then we're just kind of dealt a series of low points for this character. We're meant to go, oh, Cloud, oh my gosh, I really hope things get better for you. It's like, Cloud, I really hope you get better. But then in the middle part of the movie, we get this one line from the character that absolutely destroyed my immersion. You see, I can't do anything. I was like, you see, that was when my immersion just died. Because right there, the main character just gives up. And again, in most places, this could be a moment where it's like, no, don't give up. Here's the thing. The character has given up from the moment the movie opened up. And we know this because he even admits as much.
I would say part of the problem with the Cloud example is, well, combination of two things that come to mind. One, Cloud at the end of Final Fantasy VII itself, it was already in a better place and everything like that, and he had already overcome his struggles and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the second is because, like, I know the reason why he had the issues in Advent Children is because of the whole genostigma disease or whatever and so on like that.
Right.
And it's a case, and it's because, like, we didn't really see all this stuff in between. So, like, there was a whole part of the journey that was missing on that part. So,
right.
Yeah.
And there was oh, sorry about that. Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, no, it was related to actually Advent Children because my journey with Final Fantasy is really weird. So I knew of Final Fantasy, but never got to play any of them. The first real thing I actually bought of Final Fantasy was Advent Children. That was my entrance to Final Fantasy VII, by the way. Before completed edition. Maybe because I was a young brat, but I enjoyed it and I find his character very compelling. I'm guessing now when you mentioned that, I'm guessing the reason why because I never saw the original, so I didn't have like went through the whole journey of Cloud. So I was kind of going through it the first time, whereas you've gone through it twice and you're seeing a lot of repeated stuff, but done like it just kind of like held him back from where he could have been. Is that why I think that could be the dissonance? Because I think me personally, I felt his journey was good. In Advent Children.
I mean, the thing is, even with the full context, if you ask me of On the Way to a Smile, even with all the in-between stuff, I still think how the portrayal went for Cloud just felt artificial at best. Like, we needed something to fill out this movie. It's like, we want you to feel dread for this character. We want you to feel the weight of his struggles. Like, we want you to understand exactly where Cloud is as a person. Like, if you felt as though you were responsible for the death of two important people of your life, wouldn't this be your reaction? I'm like, yes. But here's the problem. We've already seen the story. It's called Final Fantasy VII. It is the story before this movie. We've seen this. The weight of the loss was already present in the previous title. The shame of all that was there. So it just feels like we are bringing the character back to square one, just like that. Now, what ends up happening here is that they give a thematic reason as for why he becomes this way. They said that the virus that he ends up incurring has a negative effect on your emotions, including sinking into despair. Which, again, I don't have a issue if you want to use a thematic reasoning for why someone is behaving the way they are. But like I said before, audiences can see through that very quickly. And one of the reasons why a lot of people sort of have this perception of Cloud and not this weird, dorky kid who happens to like motorcycles and tech is because their perception of him has been colored by this broody and just ever-present, distant personality, which he never really displayed in the original title. So it's like, I think this is to kind of get off the Final Fantasy VII example a bit, because I don't really want this to turn into an Advent Children bashing hour, especially since Rebirth is almost here and all that. I feel the problem with situations like this when we want to draw out care out of the audience, to make them care or relate to a character. I feel this needs to be done in a way in which a character is not reduced to, like Mark mentioned earlier, a sad sack, or they're in a position where we don't buy that they're going to improve or get better. Because it is so common for people to keep, brutalizing a character to make us care, when in all honesty, all they're really accomplishing is making their own character feel like a plot device. Another example I can bring up is Sarah in The Walking Dead's video game. Now, Sarah is this little girl who's been sheltered throughout the entire apocalypse. She doesn't really know what's going on because her father refuses to show her how nasty the world is. And for a minute, you can kind of understand where Carlos is coming from, because he has seen what this world looks like. And so have you, because you just played The Walking Dead Season 1. So you know what's going on. But the problem with this is the game teases you a chance where Sarah can become self-sufficient. You spend all your time into that. You teach her how to use a gun. You do all of this. But guess what happens to this character? Take a wild guess why I'm talking about this today. I want someone
She
here to get...
lives.
I don't know. Don't she sounds like she dies. I don't know. I don't play
I think she becomes the main character.
No, she dies. She gets eaten. She gets eaten by a zombie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just joking.
I got invested in this character's arc for just a minute. I was able to empathize with this idea that, hey, I don't get anything. I want to be able to help people, but I don't know how. I was so ready to see where this storyline was going, only for them to completely tear it up right in my face. So I was like, so what was the point of all this investing? What was the point in you showing me all of this and letting me know how this character works? Like, why would you do this to me? Why would you give me this hook and not do anything with it? It's like, this is a bit of a trick.
Would you say, because it sounds to me, it sounds to me, it's not like so much they didn't do enough work to make you empathize with the character. It sounded like they did too much work for what they were planning to do with the character. So
exactly. That's what. Yeah. You see, that's the opposite extreme of the problem. It's like you do so much, but then you don't do anything in the end. You just cut it off right then and there. Right when it feels like you're about to do something, you realize, okay, I don't really have all the time to invest in it, so I'm just gonna cut things short here. That is the worst way for this to work out. Like, it is one thing if you're trying too hard to make me care for a character, and I cannot feel their cause. I can understand maybe where they're coming from, but I genuinely cannot understand what they're about. I can work with that. But if you string me along long enough only to just cut the line when you feel like you can, I just feel it's genuinely insulting at that point.
Yeah, because I ain't seen the Walking Dead, but it sounds like they put in so much work to make her seem like she's gonna be a main character, to the point where it sounded like you was even just like convinced, of course she's gonna be a main character, like she's not gonna die anytime soon, but she was really just gonna be a character to motivate the other character. But they went too far in. Yeah, I can totally get it. Understand where that can be annoying. I actually had a question about if you could take the empathy too far, and I think that pretty much answers it. I did have, I'm not sure if it's probably super relevant now, but and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I watched this movie, but you know the Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man movie trilogy. So like the Spider-Man, like from Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2, I thought about this because you're mentioning like Cloud's, I think I won't say this, but just it was something kind of I felt was kind of related, but maybe done better. But correct me if I'm wrong. Where in Spider-Man 2, he goes through a moment where he regresses, he loses his powers. But
Spider-Man no more.
Yeah, and but from what I understand, from what I remember, it's been a while. I haven't watched in years, but I remember it panned out pretty good. If anything, I've heard that it done really good overall as a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
So
personally, I'm cool with it. That's one of the reasons why when I will push back against Rocky's like lesson and everything like that, though I get his logic. Spider-Man 2 is an example where I point to where I'm like, no, this whole Spider-Man No More storyline as a whole is a really good one, and it's popular for this reason, and it's great for exploring the character. I think it touches well on what I said near the beginning when it came to the rules for hurting people, and that you want to hurt them in a way that only hurts your hero. And in his case, in like Peter Parker's case, it's like being unable to do all this stuff and everything that he wants to, and like it's everything that's Gonna quiet, please. It's all that stuff that's built around that and so on. Like that's my personal read on it, but I know it could vary.
No, because like I argue that's why Spider-Man 2 is one of the best superhero movies, or just one of the best movies of all time. Because it's very much aware of the feelings of its main character, and it's not as though Peter has gotten to a point where he's just like saying, screw it, I don't want to be Spider-Man anymore. It's that he's realizing what this means to be Spider-Man. In the first movie, it's just that's the honeymoon phase. The second movie is like, okay, now I got to come to terms with what this actually means. And because of that, even as low as how Peter Parker gets, you still see the spirit of this young man. You still see a man who's trying to do the best he can, but he has to make a choice that is ultimately better for him and for the people that he loves. Because at some point, this life he's realized that this life is self-destructive, and I feel as though that is a very compelling thing to get behind. Because the thing is, we've all had that before. We've all had this moment where we're like, there's something that we like to do, but we come to realize something. Either one, we don't have time for it. Two, we don't really have the time to actually commit to it. And three, or this one is probably a very far off possibility, but it might put my family in danger if I keep on this specific path, because they're probably not going to be able to afford to bail me out. I'm sure we've all had a position somewhere like the first one rather than the extreme like the latter. It's a very human and it's a very simple thing that you can get behind and even empathize with. Because whether we are aware of it or not, there's just some aspects of life that we just can't control or that we just don't choose to get ourselves involved in. And when it does happen, the old phrase "life comes at you fast" takes on a whole new meaning, because now you understand what it means. If nothing else, like Mark mentioned, like, I think Araki has a point insofar as that we're not aware of the fact that Spider-Man 2 exists. Because like, it is possible to take your character to the lowest, but you don't necessarily have to make it into like a beating stick where the character is just getting brutalized. You don't
AKA
have to...
Spider-Man in the comics.
Yeah. Right. Like, you don't have to take it to that point. Sometimes it's just a matter of, hey man, life's hard. There's some choices that I wish I didn't have to make, but I have to make them. The character doesn't necessarily have to break down in depression over it. They can just go with the fact that kind of sucks, man. And that's sometimes that's really all you need. And the other thing to consider is how this choice ends up affecting other people. Because another good thing that Spider-Man 2 does, it shows you how the decision that he makes no longer to be Spider-Man, you get to see how that starts to affect Jameson of all people. Because regardless of whatever you think about Jameson, Spider-Man completes him. And he becomes aware of that in this movie. So that when the time comes for Peter to be Spider-Man again, guess what? That's the Jameson we've come to know. This rambunctious, loud, shouty, borderline conspiratorial individual manages to come back when he realizes that the game has started anew. Because Spider-Man is back. He's now complete. He's now free to be J. Jonah Jameson all over again. And in a sense, you could argue that that Jonah was at his lowest in that movie too. But it wasn't necessarily depressing. It was funny. So it is possible for you to turn someone at their lowest into a joke. I mean, I don't know what more to tell you other than if you put J. Jonah Jameson in a Spider-Man costume, that is hilarious to me. That is genuinely hilarious, bro.
Nah, that'd be hilarious. But actually, I think you kind of touched upon something I was going to probably lead into next. I think you kind of mentioned like the comics and Spider-Man, they go to a point where it gets really unrelatable. And I was kind of thinking about like, about writing characters that you don't relate with or empathize with, and like, I think it's more of a writer question. Like, how as a writer would you write a character which you personally don't empathize with yourself? Like, how would you go about that?
Ooh, now that's a fun one, actually. I want to let someone else answer that first before I throw my hat in.
Yeah.
Could you restate the question again, if it's all right?
So it's more of a writer question. So kind of like, say if you're writing a character which you don't really relate to, their morals you don't relate with. There's nothing really you personally yourself really can latch onto and empathize with. Like, how would you go about writing a character like that in your story? You still need to make him compelling. You still make his reasons reasonable. Like, but you as a writer, you're not there with him. You're not connected with him in that sense. Like, how would you go about?
If it's all right, can I also answer this, or like answer my interpretation of this?
Oh, sure, yeah,
probably. I don't know. I haven't spoken the whole podcast, so I thought I may as well chip in. But what was it? I was thinking this actually reminded me of basically when I was trying to research, or I was trying to write, like, not necessarily a character, but I was writing a scenario of war, right? But I've personally never went to war, and I wanted to write like the idea of war like as something very haunting and stuff. And also I wanted to replicate the idea of like how there are people who have like those who have witnessed war, they're like kind of traumatized, or like, then it has affected them negatively. And basically, when I, instead of like, I couldn't relate to that, but I instead just tried researching like about war veterans and stuff like that. Sometimes I feel like this can maybe stretch to like writing characters that you don't connect with. I think sometimes doing research on it, or it could even be based on someone you know. But if not that, you can always like look at interviews of a particular person or individual that has went through it. I think like a lot of the times I don't have. Well, I mean, as a male person, I don't have much of a, how do you say, connection, or I don't know what it's like to be a woman, right? But so if I don't know, if I want to maybe write female characters, or maybe things like pregnancy or anything like that, these type of factors, if I ever wanted to write about this, it's best always, I feel, to like always try researching it or like looking into it. But I don't know.
That's a good way of putting it, because I think I have this same. I think I might have said this when we talked about like we talked about representation. Is okay. There are people who we don't fully understand. We're not in the shoes of. But first of all, I think with these things, you always got to start with the things we do have in common. Okay. First of all, okay, is he human? Okay, he's human. So he probably is red, I should hope. He probably has XYZ things that are similar to me. And then work from there, and then approach the differences with with research. Definitely do your research on a thing, and then just kind of like, I think at least for me, I just kind of just put myself in their shoes. It's like okay, it's like okay, what would it be like? After doing the research and then kind of getting a good picture, it's like, okay, what would it be like to be in that situation and to, have this experience I never had? Like, what would have to go through my mind, and what would seem normal to me, or just even like probably do like when you do research, you probably see people, this X group or whatever who you don't, ain't got much in common with, and they're probably saying stuff that are just so out of your league, you just don't get. So then, I get curious. I'm like, okay, what day must I have lived where saying that is just normal to me? Like, that just comes to mind. Like, what experience do I have to have? What people do I have to be around? Like, what do I have to be saying? In the back of my mind, if I can just say that top of my head, although I think it's strange. I think going from there and just working your way down, and then doing research, and then if you know someone who's like that, show them the thing, especially if you think it's so out of your league that you have to like show it to someone. Ideally, if you can do that. I think that's like a good way to do it, because I think at the end of the day, when you're going to write it, you're going to have to feel empathy or understand them. Like say for even kind of related to villains, because it's kind of in the same ballpark. We wouldn't. I can't imagine a lot of us would be doing some of the crazy things we have our villains do. Because we would be raised better than that. But you still gotta like come to work out, okay, what kind of day did this person have to think that, I don't know, extreme silly cartoon example, tying down 30 kids on the track is fine, like what do you got to be thinking where they think that's fine? Because I think most people, even bad people, don't sit there thinking, oh, I am bad. They kind of, even if they know morally it's wrong, they have this excuse in their head, or this conviction in the heart that what they're doing is excusable or okay because of XYZ reason. You got to find XYZ reason. I think that's
this actually comes back to why I use stuff like the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and motivation problem. Since the psychology is right there, it's literally right there. Like there's not really much. It's like, oh, I wonder why someone has. Oh wait, high desire for power. This is what people want because they don't because they need more of this. And like exactly. I'm like, okay, I got this. Then I can just work from there. It makes it really easy. Really, once you just like take time to understand people and the patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes I just rely on my intrusive thoughts, and I use those as a motivation for how evil stuff, the villains could come up with.
Meanwhile, on my end, like one of the characters I'm writing is an abject fascist. Like, there's just no getting around that. That's the kind of person he is. He believes in this monumental idea of humanity that genuinely does not exist. He just thinks it does. So he will do everything and anything to go towards that goal. I personally could not see myself chasing after something that doesn't exist, but here's the problem. Technically speaking, whether we are aware of it or not, we're always chasing after some concept, an idea. It's that idea that makes life worth living. It's no different for a fascist who's looking out for this stuff, and they're willing. And the only difference between me and the fascist is that I'm not willing to kill anyone to get towards that goal. I'm not willing to displace people. I'm not willing to execute people in the streets. And I most certainly am not willing to talk about grandiose ideas of freedom while enslaving the very people that work for me. I'm not willing to do that, but he is. So, what's very funny to think about is it's easy to think that we're not capable of empathizing with fascists, Nazis, or any of those people because we've gotten so used to the idea that evil is just a very simple stripe that we can simply just call evil and just walk away from. I'm here to tell you that it's not that simple. It never has been. Because, like, while you might not be able to empathize or even sympathize with the violent ideology of fascism, it's something that inadvertently exists within anyone and within everyone in some shape or form. The only difference is that we're not outright willing to hurt anyone. We know the cost of a life, and since we know that cost of a life, at least to some capacity, we're not willing to turn those ambitions and desires out against anyone. But what happens to the people that are? At that point, they have crossed what we call a Rubicon. A good example of this that I'm referring to is the movie Die Runtergang. I don't know how many people here have actually watched it. It's basically a movie detailing the last days of Nazi Germany. I have never felt more uncomfortable watching a movie on the big screen all those years ago. Because watching that movie made me realize something very disquieting. Those people were just as human as you or me. They're just as human as you or me. This doesn't justify their actions by any stretch of the imagination. But the thing is, Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Hitler, and all these Nazis, the ones that we have come to hate, rightfully so, they were just as human as we were. And that's the problem. The fact that we simply cast these entities as undeserving of any degree of analysis or any degree of sympathy, or at least coming to understand where they came from, it's what allows evil to perpetuate in the first place. Because we simply have this mustache twirling notion of how evil works to this day, even.
Yeah,
but it's a lot.
I get why it's there societally, because I mean, obviously, when someone does something evil at the end of the day, you gotta mentally separate yourself. Okay, we don't go there, we don't do that, and
Right.
That comes with that separation of empathy wise. But yeah, when you start to research it and start to actually write a character like that, you're gonna have to dig in, and you're gonna have to find the truth, like, which is we're not too different, too alike. We could, if
Exactly
roles were switched, who's to say we would be doing the exact same thing?
Yeah,
it's sad. It's just the truth. Yeah.
Because when I started writing this character, I only started to understand just how nasty his crimes were the longer I went into my story. Because it's like, okay, so what exactly did this character have to do to retain this order and completely destroy the previous political dynamic? Well, it's quite simple. He got the previous king murdered. He used he performed a military coup. He then made it impossible for anyone to speak out against him. He not only censored the media, he went out of his way to murder journalists. This is an aspect within my story that most characters do not talk about, mainly because, like we always say, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
And in order for me to really understand how someone could behave like that, they believe that their cause is so just that they will simply not allow a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
They will simply not allow for that. And honestly speaking, when you know that you're morally justified and when you're right about something, you probably wouldn't want anybody telling you that you're wrong either. And if you're of that personality, does it make sense that we can at least somewhat understand how these people work? This isn't to justify this or anything. I fucking hate fascists just as much as the next person. I genuinely do. What I am saying, though, is while we can simply say that there's no way in hell that I could ever understand how people can work this way, I hate to say it, but you probably understand them more than you think. It's just very uncomfortable to think about, and I realize this the more I write this character.
Because kind of like saying, you have to delve into that character, and then you have to start imagining, okay, doing these crazy things. Okay, what kind of life do they have to live? Like, what do they have to do to think this is okay? And it's an experience. It's definitely an experience. Okay, I had one. It's kind of I think we touched on it a little bit. Just it's empathy, but more with side characters. Because obviously, I think each main character, side characters, and all that stuff, they kind of, depending on what role they play, will kind of depend how much you will focus on empathy and sympathy to make it work. I think the reason I think, especially think about this, good example which you're saying in The Walking Dead, where you thought that the girl was going to be a pretty important character because of how much time they made you care for her, then she got killed off. And if they did a little less work, it would have worked out better, ironically. So, this question is kind of more just about a take on like, your thoughts on using empathy and sympathy on side characters. Like, how would you say it differs from like the main character? I think it's quite simple answer, I think, but I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Hello? Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. So question. I guess I can answer a question for myself. It's So side characters, when you do like empathy and sympathy for them compared to the main characters, is I think obviously just because they're side characters as well, they're gonna have less time on the screen. So what's gonna be there, it has to be more. It's gonna be more concise, and it has to be to a point where it doesn't overshadow the main character. Because I think to have more sympathy and more empathy for a character, kind of not all the time, but kind of requires giving them more time. So I think the reason that stands out to me was your example, Kite, with the on The Walking Dead with the girl who you thought, oh, it's gonna be a pretty important character to do all these things to this character. It's got to be going somewhere with it, right? And it's like, no, not really. She's just kind of being killed off. I think you can think that, oh, I'm gonna make this side character feel like make him relatable as like the main character. But I think depending on how you do it, you can take it too far compared to like your main character, and that can cause its own issues. So I think there's definitely I think all these there's a balancing act, but I think with side characters, it's more about, I think, be more concise, and it has to kind of relate to the main character. So depending on what kind of story you're doing, it has to kind of relate to the main character to a degree, and just more concise, less, I guess, expanded upon, but
ironically
definitely felt in the page.
What is really funny about what we're talking about when you bring it up again, I just thought of another example that might seem a little bit contradictory, considering this is one of my favorite properties of all time. So, how many people in this room have ever watched Neon Genesis Evangelion?
Oh, yes.
Half of it. I haven't finished it, but I've been spoiled on a lot of stuff. So
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So I won't dwell on it too long. But what's interesting about Evangelion is that whenever anyone tells me about Shinji spending so much of his time whining for all the series, it's very difficult for me to tell them that that's not entirely the case, because it is true to a point. It is very true that Shinji does spend a good chunk of the series kind of in a rut. What is also true is that there are several instances where it looks like he's coming out of the shell little by little, but then something happens that throws him right back to where he started. And then that's when we get to End of Eva, where he is arguably at his most pathetic. And it is very difficult for me to tell people that they're not wrong. And even when I say that is entirely the point, I still don't use that to deflect the criticism. However, what Evangelion manages to do, especially during the finish line, is that Shinji is able to look at the camera and tell you that he knows that he's not the best person. He knows that he absolutely despises himself. But maybe I could learn to love myself. Maybe I could learn to find a place in this world. And it's a very uplifting message. It just kind of looks at the eye of the storm of self-hatred and depression. And when you look at it that way, there was just no other way that this show was going to be anything but what we got. Especially due to the mind of the person who made it at the time. But what I'm really getting at is when your character is through the ringer so much and they're not changing, I can't blame someone for getting angry with them. The difference, though, between a Cloud and Shinji example is that the message with Shinji, I feel, even in spite of everything, hits me more on a personal level, because I felt as though I was watching Shinji grow little by little. With Cloud, I already know he's capable of this. Why are you putting me through this again? Like, why are you trying to convince me that... why are you trying to convince me about this whole... But think about when we fought that battle. It's like, we lost that strength, but somehow I think Cloud's managed to find it again. I'm like, Tifa, what are you talking about? You guys are still kicking ass and taking names. It's just Cloud over here being an idiot. And the writers of the movie not getting the points. Like, nothing, if you ask me, feels more insulting than when it feels like I have to get the narrator to tell me why the character is in this artificially low state. Nothing feels more artificial to me than that. even though I can argue that Shinji had his look at the camera moment to address the audience, it still felt as though that was coming from the man. That was coming from the character. With Cloud, it just felt like they were trying to lull me into this for dramatic effect. And when a character's emotional state is just used for the sake of dramaticism and everything else like that, it becomes so much harder for me to care or to get invested. Because not only do I feel like it's insulting my intelligence, like I said before, it feels like I'm wasting my time. There's a point with Shinji, despite the fact that I was dragged for like 24 episodes plus a movie, but still, I still managed to get something out of that. With Advent Children, it just feels like Cloud just went back to how he was at the end of the first game, which again is fine. But that was the version of the character I came here to see in the first place. You could have had him learn a completely different lesson altogether. But no, we had to do this for drama's purposes. Not fun, honestly.
Yeah. On terms in regards to like Evangelion, yeah, I definitely can relate to what you're saying. It's funny though. I remember when I first watched Evangelion, I was much younger. I think I just got into anime, so I just kind of getting into it, just barely off the cups of Naruto, and I just saw a scene of end of Evangelion. I'm like, yeah, no, I can't do this. This is too much. And then as years go on and I watch it, I'm like, oh, I know why this was too much. This is too close to home.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It is really raw. And what I really like about it is like I think people on the surface will look at it and think this is really depressing. This is super depressing. It can't get any more depressing than that. But it's more like the story narrative takes you so far deep in the trenches of like the darkness and depression that there is no other way but up. Like you hit absolute rock bottom, and there's no other way but to go up. You know what I mean? And I think that's really cool. Like how it kind of portrays that. Like even despite everything they've been through, he still refused to like just become goop and become one and stop the pain. It's like
exactly
that is flipping up. If that ain't optimistic in that situation,
it is a very optimistic message. And the fact of the matter is, there's a point in all of our lives where we are somewhat of a Shinji Ikari, but it's just a matter of what ends up taking us out of that depressive slump. We might not get out of there right away, but we at least can take the first step. Which is why I feel that a lot of the strain and annoyance that comes with Evangelion is ultimately leading towards something that's very positive at the very end of its journey. But this is why I mentioned this kind of feels like a contradiction when I say it out loud, because everything I just said about Advent Children can still apply to Eva. The only difference is Shinji does not change. He literally does not change. He's taken the first steps towards that. So that's the only reason why it manages to skirt by. Because the fact of the matter is, you can try to tell a quote-unquote Evangelion or Shinji plot if you really, really want to, but there has to be a very good reason as to why we are going through this journey in the first place. Because it is very easy to keep brutalizing a character, like Mark mentioned earlier. You can keep martyring them left, right, and center, okay. But the fact of the matter is, if you keep doing that, you are fundamentally robbing us of a reason to actually care for them. Like, what exactly do we gain by seeing this character happy when all we know them to be is a very miserable and a very stressful person to put up with? This is ironically one of the reasons why some people did not like Lightning in Final Fantasy 13. We were able to understand her motivations. We were able to at least empathize with the goal of her wanting to keep her sister safe. Hell, we can even understand why she decided to change her name to Lightning of all things. But like I mentioned again, it was very rare to see a smile out of that woman's face throughout the entire game. Now here's the thing. I actually like her. I like her as a character.
Yeah,
but if someone tells me, oh yeah, I absolutely love Lightning. Like, I will defend Final Fantasy 13 where I can. I will do that if you need me to. However, it is by that token, it is why I like it to a point why I genuinely cannot stand a good chunk of the game. Because it just feels like this character is just unpleasant to deal with. Like, just very one tone. Granted, her layers do open up a bit more as we continue. They do. That's the good news. The bad news is how much you have to put up with. And finally,
out of here. I think I've just realized something with all this. Since a lot of this has just been saying characters people don't like and stuff, and I realized, one second. Part of the issue is, it goes back to what I said with BCI, Believe, Care, Invest. There's a case of, a lot of these examples just lack on the believe and invest part. That's pretty much the core issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Particularly with invest, like all these examples, like I don't like this character. It's just because it comes down to investment. That's all it's really been. And to invest, I didn't. Okay, I'll go into it anyway. So investment. To invest us, believing in caring is not enough. We tell stories to show each other how we solve problems. Most great stories are ultimately about one primary hero solving one large problem. We want to be reassured that we can trust this hero to solve this problem, and we want at least a few clues early on that they have what it takes. That's where investment comes into. And the rules to make characters people invest is, one, we want to find the ironies and stuff. Like, we love heroes who lose by winning, and we love heroes who win by losing and stuff like that. We love all the little interesting, meaningful ironies and stuff like that. And like the other thing, second rule of getting us to invest in a hero is have them bridge two worlds. Like, I gotta put that best.
What do you mean by bridge two worlds?
Yeah, like you want to like more things like social culture. Like, let's say, I'll use an example in this book, Mean Girls. Only Caddy is welcome to both the art freaks and the plastics. Or Malcolm X is the only one who is upscale, the upscale black residents of Roxbury, Boston. The less pretentious people hang out in the Roseland Ballroom. I could probably think of plenty of examples. Like if I thought about it elsewhere, I hadn't really prepped on this side yet, so I wasn't really thinking examples.
Yeah,
and for the third rule is you want to get for getting invested. Sometimes heroes root for moments will be self-destruct. Like the moments we root for them will be self-destructive. You know, like Luffy punching a celestial dragon in the face.
Yeah.
And the fourth rule for getting us to invest is to have them grin with defiance, like in the face of stuff and everything like that. And the aspects overall, like these are broad categories, and I can go into all kinds of techniques on specifically how, but it comes down to badassery, wish fulfillment, special skills, and attitude. This is where, like, when coming back to caring, like, if you just have this side alone, that's where you kind of lean into characters, people, and it's where you get overpowered characters and shit, and, like, all kinds of issues there. As I said before about caring, overall, you want to hit those aspects of suffering, lack, embarrassment, humiliation, and worry, plus those rules I mentioned before and stuff like that. And these two in combination, plus, the belief stuff, which I'm not going to go into the four aspects of the BCI right now because I've done that in a different episode I already made and stuff like that. But as a whole, that's why all these things come together to make enjoyable characters and so on. And it's also key to, like, get certain things across early on, because that's kind of what helps to, sell people on the characters and get them to actually care about the rest of the story after you've pulled somebody in with genre and stuff like that.
It's really funny how we use terms like sell and investment in situations like this, but it makes a scary amount of sense when you think about it. Because, like, you're investing your time into this expecting that you're going to get your money's worth for your time and how, like your return on your investment, basically. But when you feel like a character is not doing that, when you feel like you cannot connect with them, but if you can't connect with them, you're still expecting to get something out of it. And if you can't do it, it just feels like your time has been wasted.
Exactly. That sums up my entire philosophy of treating this, like, why I treat entertainment as, I see entertainment as a transaction, and that's why I always make a point, like the various things I suggest, to maximize or emphasize certain things to play to that particularly. Like, ultimately, we as writers, we are salesmen in our way, saleswomen, whatever. We all do that. We do that, and the audience is the buyer, and, like, that's why it's a whole transaction there. And that's also why artists who kind of, like, focus too much on themselves and everything can lead to various issues there. And I kind of find it more, hey, you brought this on yourself. You chose this. That's why you must write for an audience instead of just yourself.
Right, because at the end of the day, like, it's important for an artist to know what their vision is, and they need to have the ability to portray it as honestly as possible. But the problem is, at the end of the day, if you're going to be showing your work to someone, whoever you're showing your work to, they need to be able to connect to it in some shape or form. Maybe not necessarily fully relate, but if this is supposed to be like a performance piece or whatever, someone has to be able to get something out of it. Because at the end of the day, if there is nothing to keep someone from coming back to your work, you've ultimately failed in that pursuit if your intention is to get your work out for other people.
As I like to often say, audiences pay with time and or money for that which entertains them. Period. No entertainment, no audience. The moment you hand something over, you give a link to a video or whatever, you enter a transactional marketplace, whether you want to or not. So that's one of the reasons why I'm always so serious about like my passion for writing and stuff like that and trying to get the principles down. Because I'm like, no, I've had a lot of things waste my time with all kinds of entertainment or take me off, and I'm like, I don't want to put other people through that.
Yeah, exactly. Because like so many, this might veer off the topic for a little bit, but I think there is a huge problem with the writing advice side of things. I really feel that there's a huge problem in that market because a lot of it comes down to don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that, do this, do that. But
here are the rules.
Here are the rules.
Some people, yeah.
I mean, never mind the fact that some of these folks are barely even authorities in the advice that they're giving you in the first place. Never mind that. It's more like, okay, but what exactly makes you the right person to be telling me this? And why exactly can't I do this? What makes it a no square every time this comes up? Because the fact of the matter is, the way how I see it, the specific tropes and ideas that they tell you not to use, there's still tools that you can use. There's nothing telling you that you can't use them. I mean, what? Just because some booktuber, no offense to you, Mark, I'm not referring to you here. You're a genius, my man. just because some booktuber tells you that you shouldn't do this or you should do that, doesn't necessarily mean that the tool is removed from the toolbox, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, here's something on that I've taken to, and that's what I always keep in mind. Story is about principles, not rules. A rule say you must do it this way. A principle says this works, and it has to remember time. Yeah. And this difference is crucial. That's kind of the key to what I do and everything like that. Like a work doesn't need to be modeled after a well-made whatever. Rather, it must be well-made within the principles that shape our art. Yeah. Anxious, inexperienced writers obey rules, and rebellious, unschooled writers break rules. Artists master the form, and that's what I'm all about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Best way to put it.
Yeah, it's really well put. Yeah, my thoughts was along the line of what works, and then like that line from Pirates of the Caribbean, like it's more guideline than rules. But yeah, pretty much.
Oh no! Trust me. I've come to find that if you look at anything or everything with that mentality, you'd be surprised how much freedom that you have in a lot of things. Yeah. I mean, there are some clearly defined rules on how you should treat people, sure, but there's some things if a guideline from a guideline perspective rather than this being the rule, this being the norm, you're gonna find yourself being able to express yourself more. You're gonna be able to find more freedom. This isn't me saying that you should disregard rules, though. The rules exist for a reason, but the problem is when you have a specific subsection of people who kind of claim themselves to be experts in their craft, when the most that they've done is release a book that fundamentally contradicts half the stuff they say. I'm not naming names. Look, listen, I'm in the booktube sphere. I watch people's videos. I hear the things they say, and then I read their books after, and I'm like, didn't you literally tell me in like a 10-minute video that I'm not supposed to do this? Why is it in here? What sense does this make? What did you tell me that you ended up doing yourself? Because my opinion on this is, if you want to use these ideas, you are well within your right to do so. Just don't tell me not to do it and I catch your ass doing it. That makes no sense.
My first thought goes when I see something like that, it's like, what was your end goal with all this? Like everything. Like
exactly.
You're saying X, Y, Z, and then you're doing ABC. It's like, well, what's the 1, 2, 3? What's the 1, 2, 3? What's going on? Like, you know.
I think they're trying to sabotage the writers, you know.
I certainly don't think they are. I just think
having
experienced enough, I just don't think many people are as good as they think they are. That's simple as that. That or they have their own bias. Like, there's a lot of things I've noticed for writing rules that people make up that I'm like, it's just more their specific taste and biases and stuff. It's like, for instance, I'll use an example going all the way back to the beginning. We were like, hey, this character, like, what's his name? We mentioned, like, yeah, he's a purpose, but like, some people will like that, some people won't. It depends on how you're doing it and how you're handling it, and like, even in there, that's an execution and so on. And so that's why I'm like, and even then, that really comes back to when it comes to a character's personality. When I bring that back around to believe, care, invest, like little stuff like that can help us. You know what? I will go into believe real quick. I've talked about it before, but like what helps us believe is the reality out that what believe CI again is. Believe is you want to believe in the reality of the hero, care about the hero's circumstances, and invest their hopes in the hero to solve their problem. And that's pretty much it. That's what great stories tend to do in the first 10 pages to sell everything with their character. And with the belief side, like I've mentioned care, and like you want to do this, and if you can like start off the story with a character in some type of way that they're suffering instantly or early on, that does those things I mentioned, like if they're harmed in a way that reveals their flaws, or like it can be out-deserved, just something that hints at it or so on like that, or various things like that can help out. And with believability, like the top rule with that is be repetitive. Like be repetitive. The best way to make a character believable is to be repetitive.
Like even if they have to reinstate their goal or they keep doing the same thing, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it's consistency.
Pretty much that. Like if you with that you want to hit your characterization hard at the very beginning. You don't want to overestimate a reader's desire to be surprised. You overall like you want to hit strong with something, emphasize it, and then with like what makes up believability, it's just one, a full life, a fully fleshed out world, universal behavior, and a specific personality. And with personality, there's unique ways of talking, backstory, flaws, secret, assertiveness, beliefs, specific tastes and belongings. And it's a lot of stuff I didn't really plan to go into right with this one, because like going back around to just caring and stuff like that, like really does still come back around to you got to harm the character in the right way overall. Yeah. Or if you're not harming them, you have another character who's harmed, and you have this character helping them who's harmed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely. I'm gonna pivot back to simply empathy with another question. We kind of be touching upon this just by this topic, but like in regard to different medium and how you portray sympathy and empathy. So, example, like in novels, films, and video games, what would you say is like the essential like differences?
Not really much
sympathy,
honestly. There's not really much.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's kind of universal, honestly.
Yeah, it is quite universal. I think the only difference is literally just by like the medium itself. Like with novels you can get a bit deeper into like their mental state, and you can use that to help highlight it. Films, you can use the camera, the lens, the
cinematography.
Thank you. Yeah. You can use cinematography to kind of help portray certain emotions. And video games, well, the player is kind of actively involved in the story, so I guess it's just a matter of using that language to help like portray it. I guess pretty simple question, but anyway, I guess it's just by proxy of media, the medium will be like how you go about it differently. But yeah, that's a pretty good simple question. I think honestly, beyond that, we don't have too many other questions. Is there any closing thoughts you guys have?
What was it? I mean, you mentioned that, in games, you're playing through the story, and that's how you're engaged. But I think the most important factor is sometimes like you can be the person, you could be the player, and like kind of you're literally in their shoes, experiencing what they're experiencing, and therefore you kind of suffer along with them, basically.
Yeah.
So
you're active
in that sense.
Involved. Yeah.
Yeah, in that sense, I'd say video games probably are the best way to create both sympathy or empathy with a character. I can name I think for me, I think I resonate the most with female characters when it's video games, especially when it's video games that like they're not afraid to make the female character like suffer. I'm not saying this as like a sadistic person, but honestly, like what was it? I could think of two examples, which is one is Hellblade and the other one is Tomb Raider 2013.
Oh man, definitely for sure.
Tomb Raider for sure.
For sure, that one, man. Like, good lord. I don't think
Catch a break.
that game is just brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Straight up.
Like, yeah, now, if I were to say,
you see,
I'll give my take. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Wait,
you're good. Go ahead.
I will say, yeah, like Tomb Raider is probably the best example because, and I honestly, I mean, people, I feel like maybe outsiders will say like, oh, it's sadistic or something, but I genuinely think it's the best way to add sympathy or empathy to a character. You have to not be afraid to let your character suffer in a way. I guess this can apply in general, but to even written books. But I feel like, yeah, in games especially, like when the developers were not afraid to make Lara Croft like have some really brutal, like there's a lot of brutal cinematic scenes where she goes through, like she gets impaled and she has to repair her own like injuries, and it's like crazy. She suffers so much, but the way she's because of that, I fully like empathy. I have so much empathy for her, and I'm so invested in the character. And I don't know if maybe this isn't a big issue for many people, but I always felt that like for female characters, I always viewed them very much as a side character, always. And I always in media that I view, I'm always trying to put my shoes in male characters. And I know this is a bit, of course, I don't know, people will interpret this weirdly. I don't know. This is just how I view media. It's how I've always done. But for sure, Tomb Raider and Hellblade were like the two games that really I felt like I was in their shoes in that moment and stuff. And I don't know. I think it's a huge achievement that when they're just not afraid to make the characters like get hurt and stuff, and you feel it yourself basically.
And I want to add to that a bit because a good example of since we're talking about character games with female protagonists, I want to bring up Tales of Berseria for a minute. So whereas Tomb Raider definitely gets the physical pain down as well as like the psychological trauma, Tales of Berseria works more into the psychological aspect among others, but basically the main character Velvet, when the game starts off, she's a very kind and approachable young lady. She has an ailing brother that she's spending much of her life trying to tend to and take care of, and then he's murdered right in front of her. You just played the first 10 minutes of the game taking care of this kid. You know where Velvet is as a person. You know what her motivations were, and now all of a sudden her reason for living is just taken right in front of her. Take a wild guess how she reacts to this situation. Violently. Absolutely batshit crazy. And you know what? I was right there with her. From start to finish. The rest of the game is dedicated to her finding revenge for her lost brother. But here's the thing. The game does not make this goal easy for you at all, because you come to realize the circumstances surrounding her brother's death were far more complicated than she ever knew. And because of that rampaging, violent character that we saw at the beginning of the game, we start to see the old her again. We start to see the kind Velvet, the maternal Velvet. We start to see that again because slowly but surely she's losing her drive for revenge. Now, you could argue that she is regressing to this to being a passive person, but I would argue that Velvet has always been a very sweet person down within. She is simply reacting violently and viscerally to her negative circumstances. So it's this weird situation of, I feel the true Velvet is the Velvet we knew at the beginning of the game. The one that we know throughout the title is still the same character. However, this is a version of her that is set forth by not just revenge, but just the fact that she cannot come to terms with her own failures. So ultimately, when she does gain her revenge and she does learn the truth of her brother's death, we again get to see the same Velvet that we knew at the beginning of the game. We even hear the voice and cadence that she started with. What I'm getting at here is, we were put into this character's shoes from the moment the story opened up. We knew what she wants. We know what she wants out of life. We know the people she cares about. And we know what she looks like when she loses that. But rarely do we ever get to see a chance of what happens when a character looks like they can gain what they've lost, and we got to see that. But here's what makes Berseria interesting. What makes it very interesting is that while we're able to see for a minute what Velvet could have, she ultimately rejects it because she knows it's a lie. She has already committed herself to this path. And even though it is possible for her to get what she wants in a lie, she rejects it not because she knows that it's illegitimate. She rejects it knowing full well that this is the person that she is and that this is the person that she has become, and she has no regrets or no shame about it whatsoever. I find that kind of writing to be extremely compelling. I understand where this character is. I would like to see them happy. But the character themselves has rejected that possibility altogether because they fundamentally know at the end of the day, the path that they're on is not one of joy. And that's not to make it sound like it's this overly edgy story. It can seem that way on the surface, but I promise you this, far from it. What keeps Velvet from going over the edge for me is just the fact that at the end of the day, she's still that little girl that you saw at the beginning of the game. And look no further than the game's ending if you don't believe me. The fact that her original voice comes back on before the credits roll tells you everything you need to know about this character. And it doesn't even come out of left field because you know what? You saw her before this journey started. You understand who this person really is. That's how you get someone to care for a character. That's how you get to relate to them, even though you can't really agree with the destruction that you cause along the way. You understand why she's doing.
Yeah, I didn't go through all of it, but I totally get what you're saying. Like you see her status quo, you see who she was before, and then throughout her journey, you kind of see what the results of losing all that was. But at the end of the day, it's still who she was. Like she's still the same character. I always kind of thought about that stuff like this in like in terms of cycles. There are there's nothing there's our journey is kind of a straight line, but we can go through cycles of different emotions and stuff. And sure, I think we kind of touch upon you don't want to repeat the same thing necessarily, especially in the story, because the story is not synonymous. The character is not synonymous to a real person. But just the idea of it's what you show, I suppose. In this regard, it showed you. It didn't really repeat itself. It just showed you who she was before, and then who she was when she lost it, and then who she. It sounded like who she could have been if she kept, if she accepted. I don't know, this option that you mentioned, but yeah, I kind of just see it's a cycle in it. It's like you people go through their emotions, and you're just seeing her whole journey of her go through her cycle of what that journey was. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, I think in terms of games and empathy, I just kind of had a more general take on it. I think you kind of both had really good examples, but I do feel like the overall how we use empathy in each of them the rules are pretty much the same, but it's just I guess there's the how and I guess the I think obviously to each their own. There is the good argument of because games have as a media has more I guess things to pull from like audio, sound, text, and everything. It has more potential, but yeah, I think it's just more of how you use them in there that makes that I find interesting. But yeah, I think that was really good place to leave that. Yeah. If there's no more closing quote, we could just end it here.
Closing quote. Be a sadist. Make people suffer.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you're going to make them suffer, at least let us know that this character is more than likely going to learn something from all of it, or at least there is a light at the end of the tunnel for them. Because you don't want the character to be perfect in everything they do. You still want some knockback, obviously. But for the love of God, don't make them an Eeyore. That's all I'm asking.
I mean, unless it's the comedy, unless it's comedy.
Yeah.
And
it's
also
for a joke. Yeah.
Also, not every character. Also, some characters need to suffer. Let them suffer. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. Oh God, I can't say their name. I was about to say a 1B spoiler. I'm like, let him die. Kill them.
No, do it.
Let the past die. Kill it if you have to.
Okay, Kylo Ren. Okay, Kylo Ren. Listen, how about this? I actually agree with letting the past die. Let's let the sequel trilogy die. Let's pretend the Rise of Skywalker didn't happen. In fact, Andor is the true sequel to Star Wars. All right,
none of that stuff did happen.
It didn't happen. That was
all right. Let's admit that the prequels were actually really good, guys.
You're on a different timeline. That's what's happened there. That's like,
what?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, are you a slider? Like, I don't.
We're in a good timeline here, guy.
Wait, hold on. Wait. You're saying that only Andor exists in this timeline?
What's Andor?
Yeah.
Oh, Disney never got Star Wars. Disney never got Star Wars.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Disney got Star Wars? When did this happen?
Hey, no, it was LucasArts all this time, guys. Come on.
Yeah,
wait, that is, jokes aside, I would like to see that timeline, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to because I might be in the minority nowadays, but I don't completely hate everything that Disney Star Wars has. But
yeah, it's not.
I don't hate everything either.
Yeah, it's not.
I just hate most of it.
Yeah, that's yeah. It's like I don't hate all of it, but I do still hate most of it. So yeah, I'm still behind you on that regard.
yeah, and I guess even though it's a joke, but I guess in a hypothetical, it's kind of that thought of if we could turn back time, would it be better? I think in general most things I'll say no. So just because of that, though, most things in Star Wars, Disney Star Wars is not that good, I still wouldn't change anything at all because you don't. I think you see movies about that where people change time and things go terribly wrong. They're like, what I had before was great. I think there's a lot of truth to that personally. But,
you know what? Maybe we should have a Star Wars episode. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Maybe they should just remake. Maybe they should just remake the originals.
No, please
no.
They did do that. It's called the first movie in every single freaking trilogy.
No, please no! Don't do it! Don't do it! I do not want that. Do not remake the first Star Wars movie. I beg you, don't do it.
Do not remake this first Star Wars movie a fourth time.
Please don't.
please, Disney.
Please don't. They're probably going to CGI stormtroopers on top of 3 other Jabba the Hutts, so we can explain where the hell those two went at the end of freaking Book of Boba Fett. Please don't do it.
What's going to happen is that they're going to make Luke a chick, and we've already done this.
Wait, should we end the recording?
I was about to say, I'll end it. We can probably shouldn't talk afterwards.
We can still talk about this, guys.
Yeah. I'll do a quick closing. Right, guys,
hold on.
Oh.
To our beloved audience, the dreaded Star Wars episode will happen someday. I will make it happen myself if I need to.
I'll just say this.
So you're gonna be like Palpatine in the background, just setting all things up.
Yes.
Initiate episode 60. Oh my gosh.
Initiate
episode 66.
66. Okay, if we ever get to episode 66,
that's it. If we ever get 66, it has to happen.
It's preordained.
Okay, cool.
The story.
I'll see you guys in 2 years.
I love doing my serious voice.
All right, see ya, guys. Bye bye.
Cool. Yeah, So it's another episode of
the audience.
Podcast,
guys. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for joining. Don't forget to subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Follow Nate's Discord server.
Do it.
Follow me. Do it. Yeah.
Do it.
But yeah, that'll be an episode of the Lounge Podcast.
Just do it.
Guys, later. Take care. Bye.
Do it.
Bye.